When you talk.
Should I not talk? Is that say, is that on?
Yes.
I should have said.
No, you're fine.
No, I'm not. I might get up.
Yeah.
We're very lucky to have a program on organ donation awareness. And Jeanette Wulf has some first-hand experience that she's going to let us know about. Hello? Okay, I'm just testing this out. First off, I just want to thank everybody for coming here today and listening to me talk. I just have a hard time believing that people would want to hear this. But, you know, I suppose it's not every day that people have 2 transplants in one lifetime. But I did. So my story actually starts when I was 14 years old. Well, that was when I was diagnosed, but I think I was about a 5th grader. And I had heard something about ordination. And I don't know, Miss Bloom's my 5th grade teacher, so I don't know if she maybe said something about it or if it was in DARE or who knows, but I came home and I talked to Mom and I was like, Mom, you know, this sounds kind of cool. I think I kind of want to do this. And she's like, all right, well, you better talk to your father. And so I was like, all right. So waited for Dad to come home from work and I said something to Dad. And Dad goes, absolutely not. Nobody's going to take my little girl's liver or organs. So I was like, oh, okay. So that was kind of that. I kind of let it go, but I had thought about it here and there, you know, again. But little did he know that organ donation would save his little girl's life. So needless to say, his thoughts on organ donation definitely changed. But I was about 14 and I started having symptoms of itching, just really, really bad. And Mom and I and everybody, we could not figure out what it was. So one test leads to another, and you know how that all goes. A lot of doctoring, and they found out that my liver enzymes were high, and I was diagnosed then with PSC, which at that time for a teenage girl was kind of a little bit rare. Mostly it happened in African American males that were 40 or 50 years old. So it was kind of odd that I got it. But so I had my first ERCP, which was a tube going down my throat, and then they'd go up into my liver and they'd balloon my bile ducts open because the disease actually strictured down my bile ducts, causing them not to function properly. So there was a slight chance after an ERCP of having pancreatitis. And so guess what? I got pancreatitis. And I ended up having ERCPs about once every 3 to 6 months. And I think that I had counted, I had about 40 of them before my transplant. So I had pancreatitis about that, I had it that many times. And it would just make you throw up and run a fever and really be very sick. It was not a good feeling. So I did that for 6 years, and then I went through evaluation to see if I was sick enough to be on the transplant waiting list. So the first time around, I was not sick enough the first time, so they said, we'll just wait and reevaluate after, you know, a couple months. And they did that. Finally, I got on the list, and I waited the first time 2 years for my liver. And when I got the call, I was actually shopping in Sioux City, and a lot of you guys will remember this, when Target used to be where JCPenney's is in the Sioux City Mall. I was actually checking out Trident gum when my pager went off, because in those days, not everybody had cell phones at that time, which is really hard to believe. But my pager went off, and I looked at it, and it said UNMC and gave me a number, and I thought, it's probably a false alarm because that had happened to me a few times. Called it, and it was actually legit. This lady who was so happy got on the line and said, Jeanette, this is UNMC, are you ready for a transplant? And I was like, yeah, like, you know, that's what everybody wants to do instead of shopping. So Joanne and I, my older sister Joanne, we took off through the mall, and I don't even remember. I know we about got killed a few times with her driving on the way down there because she was kind of in shock, and I think we all were. So anyway, we went and I had my first transplant, and I did great afterwards and just kind of flew right through. I ended up going through with a few other people who had been transplanted at that time, and just from being in the waiting room at the transplant clinics, I met a lot of really nice, awesome people who I'm still friends with today. I ended up nannying for my liver doctor in Omaha, which was kind of convenient. So after my transplant, I ended up going to their house, and I would get blood work done from my port. Well, I didn't have a port at the time, but from my central line, and he would take it to the hospital that morning to see how my labs were doing, because it's really important after a transplant, or forever, to make sure that your levels for immunosuppression are within a certain range. So I have to take my pills at a certain time every day, every 12 hours. So I take it at 10 in the morning and 10 at night. And I'm very faithful about doing that, because if you're not, well, you're not going to hold on to your liver. So that just tells my body when I take those to, I thought that this thing was coming off. But anyway, it just kind of lowers my immunosuppression, or my immune system, just enough that I don't reject my liver. So I have been on immunosuppression for a very long time, for 22 years, almost 23. So they just have to make sure that that is always accurate. So once a month, I continue to get these labs for the transplant team, and I still do that for them. But I just remember going through my first transplant and having a lot of people visit me. A lot of I see out here today, Judy. I always remember Butch driving in the vehicle thinking he was going to break me over every bump in the road. I was holding the pillow and clenching myself, because it's quite a scar, as you can see in some of those pictures. But so after my first transplant, I did really well. But since I was immunosuppressed, it's really easy for me to get things. Get the cold, the flu, anything. Even just going outside and breathing the air, I can get sick. I have gotten sick from just breathing the air many times, or even water. I got to be careful with water. So it's just, you just never know what this body's going to do, because it's always just, I call it a hot mess. But it's my hot mess, so. But anyway, I kind of went through things here and there and had my ups and downs. Had a major surgery. I ended up having my colon taken out when I was 25. I was starting to get my liver disease back again, and my colon was kind of correlates with the liver disease that I had. So I was having some trouble, so they took my colon out, and then I did really well again after that. That surgery was no joke. That one was really hard and awful, and when they told me I was going to have it done, I was just not looking forward to it, as anyone would. But he told me it'd take me a year to recover, and I kind of laughed at him, because I'm like, I've been through a liver transplant, this will be nothing. Oh no, he was serious. It took me a year to get used to everything, and it was hard and awful. And anyway, I made it through that one, and more ups and downs, but finally they gave me the okay to have a baby. So Jackson came along, and that was kind of a big deal, because just transplant alone, having a baby is kind of high risk. And I ended up carrying Jackson full term. He was almost a 9-pound baby, and I just loved every minute of being pregnant. And we call him my little miracle baby, so I still call him that, and he doesn't care. Anyway, years passed again, and I think that it was like 2012, I was diagnosed with a rare cancer. And that was hard because, you know, here I was a mom, and Jackson was only about 3 at the time, and we were busy, you know, Jeff and I, we farm, and just keeping up with it all was hard because when I was really bad, it was about every week I was getting blood transfusions. And so my hemoglobin was low all the time, and I was so tired. And eventually I would end up running high fevers, so it was nothing for me to run 104 to 106 and getting supper on the table, you know, and keeping up with everybody, because nobody has time to be sick when you're a young mom and you have farmers in the field. So anyway, you kind of put your big girl panties on and you just carry on. And I don't know how I did it sometimes. I was just talking to Mindy and Mom earlier that the lowest hemoglobin I had was a 3. And I got groceries the day before. And I was telling them that Jackson was on the front of the cart. You know, he was up on it riding along, and I told him, I'm like, you have to get off the cart. I can't push the cart with you on there like that, just because it was so exhausting. But you slowly get used to feeling like that, and so now I never know when my hemoglobin is low because it happens so slow and you get so used to feeling cruddy. So that morning actually, I wash my bedding every week, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to wash my bedding today. I feel good, I'm doing this. So I tore it off. By the time I got home from groceries, there was no making the bed. I was like, what am I going to do? Jeff was in the field. I just felt so frustrated. I'm like, this is so ridiculous. I can't even make my own bed. What's wrong with me? Well, one of my girlfriends had come over and she helped me, thank goodness. But that night I ended up spiking a fever and ended up in the hospital the next day and had quite a few units of blood. I don't remember because I've had so many of these instances that I just think I try to block them out because they're just not fun to remember. But over the last, I think it was 10 years, I kind of went through my ups and downs of just feeling cruddy, but carrying on, you know, you just have to. And then I got sicker, if you can imagine that. So I could tell the difference between a cancer fever and a septic fever. So my liver was starting to not function correctly again. The bile ducts were stricturing down, and so I got what they called superbugs. And these superbugs were kind of hanging out in my liver. And every time I would go into the hospital and get antibiotics, those superbugs would use that antibiotic against me then the next time. So then I would never be able to have that same antibiotic. So being septic was awful because you just feel, it's weird, but once I hit 104 to 106 fever, I felt better. But it was the 101 to 102, I felt really awful. But I guess that's when your body starts shutting down. That's probably when I was starting to feel better, which is weird. But so then I would go into the hospital, and each time I would, you know, I was allergic to all the pain meds, which was really awful for me. So the opioid crisis really hit me in the foot because the only thing that worked for me was fentanyl. Well, when you go to the liver floor, they do not give fentanyl at all. And so every time I would go in running a high fever like this in a lot of pain, and they would not give me anything for it. And there were several times I remember I was so bad that I just remember praying, Lord, either take me or something has to change, because it was awful. So thank the Lord, something would change every time, and you just get through it. But so I had a doctor down there who advocated for me and said, you need a transplant or you're gonna die. Basically, that was how she put it. I had one more antibiotic left, and then I was going to be in trouble because, the superbugs were gonna use it against me. So she moved heaven and earth, and the transplant team said yes, they'd give me a look. And boy, before I knew it, I was going through evaluation, which is so awful. It was awful the first time around, and it was awful the second time around. Oh wow, they run you through the mill. It's not fun. Anyway, so I made it through evaluation, and they were deciding whether to put me on the list or not. So finally they were like, yes, they voted that they would put me on the list, which was kind of a big deal because I have cancer, and it said no one with cancer can have a transplant. So we were very hopeless. I mean, I did not think it would happen. The only thing that I had going for me was my blood type, which is kind of my motto also. It's B positive.
No.
So B positive is not a very common blood type. So there's not a ton of people. There's not a ton of people on the list for B positive. So, and there's not a ton of people that are probably my size. So he thought that maybe we could try it, and I had to have a letter of exemption from the United Network of Organ Sharing, who are the ones that control who gets on the list and who doesn't. Well, this was during COVID, so it was a kind of a tough go at that time because, there's still a lot of people waiting for transplants, and then, nobody's traveling and nobody's doing things, and so they did not give me the letter of exemption first. So I had another doctor who just pored over my chart for months and wrote another letter of exemption, and it got passed. And so I finally got on the list. But while this was going on, I was still having septic bouts, and they had, at that time, you'll see in some of these pictures, put a tube in that went into my liver and was holding some of my bile ducts open. And so I would flush it every day, sometimes twice a day if it flushed hard. And that kept things flowing in there, and, so some of those superbugs didn't build up and make me run a high fever. Because basically I was always septic, but it wasn't enough for me to, run a high fever and end up in the hospital. So I would a lot of times run a high fever at home, but I knew if it was a cancer fever, and then I would access my own port and give myself fluids. So my son thinks that it's normal to access ports and run around with a pole at home. But poor kid. Anyway, I was doing that every 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. I was going down to Omaha and having this tube replaced. And it would take me about a week to recover after that, because it just knocks it out of you. And sometimes the tube didn't work, so I'd have to go down right away again afterwards. And during COVID, then Jeff just dropped me off, and I'd say, see you in 8 hours. So it was just not a fun time. And I think that toward the end, we had been doing it for 3 years, and I think we were just tired. We were tired of going down, and it was just really exhausting. Well, they put me on the list, and the second time around, I waited 2 months. So I couldn't believe it. I was prepared to wait for another 2 years. So we were just getting into summer, and I thought, I'm going to spend this summer teaching Jeff and Jackson, how to make meals and laundry and Well, it didn't go that way at all. I ended up celebrating my 20-year anniversary on June 10th to my first transplant. And then 4 days later, I got the call for my second one on a Sunday night. So we had just had Creek Days, and we had an awesome time. And I just had a really good weekend prior to my transplant. And the night that we got the call, Troy and Kathy came over, Johnson, and Jeff was eating a Tootsie Roll from the parade, and he lost a filling in the Tootsie Roll, and so that was kind of like the ongoing joke, you know, he ended up spitting it out, and he didn't get that fixed for like 6 months after that, because he was a little busy doing other things, but who would have thought that that would have been the least big deal that was going to happen that night. So we went to bed, and it was about 12:30, and we got the phone call, and that phone call, the second time around, was way different than the first, because my second time around I had way more to lose than I did my first time around. I was married, and I had Jackson, and second transplants don't go as well as first ones just because of you know, the time that has passed, and it's hard to have the, I have a lot of scar tissue and stuff, and so it's harder to hook them up. And when I went through evaluation, they just made it sound really doom and gloom for the second transplant, and I really just had a hard time knowing what the right thing to do, but I had nothing to lose. I mean, I had to try it. So, I guess before we even left the house that night, I had a hospital bag packed at all times, but we had to pay bills. I had to teach Jeff how to do that quick before we left, because if something happened to me, he would have no idea. And that was what I was going to spend the summer helping him do, because I do all the bill paying and all the book work. So we kind of did that really quick, and we just, it was really awful, especially when Jeff woke Jackson up. Jackson didn't take it very well, and I never ever want to do that again. I remember just standing in the hallway, and we just stood there and all cried and hugged, and because we just didn't know what was going to happen. So on the way down to Omaha, I just prayed the whole time, because I thought, gosh, just help me get my head around this, you know. I need some direction, and I need to feel like this is going to be okay. And I just had a calm come over me, and I just knew at that point that it was going to be okay. And so that really helped going forward, you know, of how we dealt with it, because it was pretty out of control at our house. I mean, it was, you know, we were just shocked getting that phone call. We were not prepared for it, but we weren't, you know. How do you prepare for something like that? But we went down, and it just took forever, and, you know, it's just like a waiting game. And Jackson had talked a few days before about what it would be like to stay up all night. Well, that night he got to stay up all night. He pulled a real bender, but probably not in the way that he ever thought that he would. Staying up all night with his parents in the hospital. Good time. Anyway, when we got down there, we had to go to the emergency room, and I'm not sure if any of you guys have ever had the pleasure of going to an emergency room in a big city. It is not cool. So we got frisked on the way in. First we thought we were going to get mugged in the parking lot. And we got frisked on the way in, and we ended up going to check in like we were told to, and they were ready for us in the main level, so we had to go back up to a different area. So we walked out, and right as we were walking out, here comes this vehicle, and it was playing really loud music. It had like 3 dogs in there, big. They were barking, and then this guy in the vehicle started yelling. And we were like, oh my gosh, let's get out of here really fast. It was so scary. Yeah. You know, I thought, geez, they should be rolling out the red carpet for me for all the stress I'm going through. Transplant, and they're just like, don't even care. Anyway, we go back to Clarkson, and then we go up to a room, and it just waited, and finally, I think it was the next day, toward about 5, they came to take me. And, well, the transplant team had been in and out all day and, you know, kind of telling us what to expect. And Jackson was in there also. And then one of the doctors, what was my doctor's name again? Grant. Dr. Grant, yeah. And it was a female doctor who did my second transplant. So she had asked Jackson, do you have any questions? And I thought, oh my Lord, this can't be good. And he said to her, what are the chances of my mom not making it through? And I thought, oh my gosh, please lie. Well, of course she didn't. And I think that the chances of making it through the surgery were 40%? Or, well, yeah, in the first year. In the first year post-op, only 40% of second transplants make it. So, you know, here she is telling Jackson, and we've had a lot of hard conversations about, you know, what it would, if I'm not around. And those are the conversations you just do not want to have with your child. And we have had to have numerous conversations about that, and that's really hard. That's a fear that I cannot take away, but you try your best, you know. So here we are waiting for this transplant, and she went ahead and told Jackson, you know, everything again, kind of more for him to understand. And okay, well then she said, do you have anything else for me? Yeah, can you take a picture of my mom's liver? Well, turns out that she forgot to do that, but she did remember to take a picture of the new liver. So I do have a picture of my new liver, which is kind of odd. But so Jackson got to see that picture, and he was happy with that. But anyway, I went through surgery, and I did great, which was amazing. So that night, they told Jeff and Jackson that they had to leave the hospital because of COVID. So they left, and they were trying to find a motel room, and it was the same night that the Olympic swim meet was going on, and then the College World Series was also going on. So there was no place to stay at all. So here they are at 8 o'clock at night trying to find a place to stay. And Jeff's like, you know, my wife's having a liver transplant right now, and it was just awful. So they kept getting phone calls through the night, and I got done with surgery about 3 o'clock. And after 3 o'clock, the nurses that were doing the transplant never called again because I went up to the intensive care unit. And Jeff and Jackson did not know how I was doing at all until 9 o'clock that next morning when they were able to come in. And they came early. They came at 8 o'clock thinking maybe they could come in, but they wouldn't let them in. And so they weren't sure what they were going to walk into at all. And when I woke up, I just remember the sun coming in, which I remember that on my first one as well. And just being like, yes, I made it through. And that septic feeling was gone right away. I felt so much better. I mean, it was unbelievable. Well, you know, they give you a lot of meds during that surgery. So the whole time I kept thinking that I was at a baseball game. And I wondered where Jeff and Jackson were. Everybody else was there, but Jeff and Jackson weren't there. Anyway, they finally came in at 9 o'clock, and I was up walking. They let me get up and walk after my second one. Whereas my first one, they were like, do not move, stay in bed. So I stayed in bed until like, I think it was the next day. They finally got me up and walking. So there's a picture of me in the walker. Well, when Jeff and Jackson came in, I was walking on the walker, and they were just like, they were shocked. Yeah, they could not believe it. They were expecting me to still be on the vent and, you know, maybe be in bad shape. They just didn't know because nobody had told them. So we were just thankful that they finally had changed the rules that Jackson could even come in. They had just done that several days before I got the call. So thank the Lord for that. But I just flew right through things. I was in the hospital for maybe, I don't know, 5 days? I was in the hospital for 10 days. I was in the hospital for a week. Then I went to the home to suites, which was a hotel room. And then I had home health come in and draw labs and do whatever. And I was home within 3 weeks. And they had told me that I'd probably have to stay down there for 3 months. So we were prepared for staying down there that long. And I just flew right through. But it was no joke still going through a major surgery like that. I mean, they still split you open and, you know, it was tough. So, but I did really well, and I never learned anything about my second donor. They wouldn't tell me anything. My first time, when I was first transplanted, they did tell me that it was a 22-year-old male. So that's the only thing I know about my first one. And at that time, I was nannying, and the kids that I was nannying for were like maybe 7 and 10. And the little girl comes up to me and she goes, "Jeanette, do you pee standing up now?" And I said, "No, I don't. I just got his liver."
That's cute.
So it's just funny what kids think. But yeah, my second one I don't know. So I have wrote both of my donors, and it takes me a long time to write those letters, because how do you really thank somebody for saving your life? I mean, that's a hard thing. And knowing that they have family that they left behind. And so it took me 3 months, and I just, you know, you want to get it right. And I just wanted to thank them for, you know, giving me a second chance. And every time I go to a ball game or a wrestling tournament or whatever it may be, I just thank my donor. And I wear my bracelet every day. I had a special friend give me a bracelet that has the date on it, and I wear that every day, and I think about them every day and the sacrifice that they made. Yeah, I do feel like it was a lady. I don't know why. You just kind of feel like you know these things. But whoever's organ that I do have, it came from somebody who was a brain dead person. And I was prepared to say yes or no to an organ that possibly had hepatitis, or because they're transplanting those now. So when we got that phone call in, we had to be ready to make that decision if that was what they had to offer. Well, it just so happened that it was the perfect liver and from a healthy person. So that's really awesome and rare, and so we were thankful for that because it helped in my recovery also. But otherwise, I still have been, my cancer afterwards kind of reared up just a little bit, which it was dormant for quite some years. I didn't have any troubles with it while I was going through the sepsis thing, but for some reason now I'm having troubles. So I do get blood transfusions like every 4 weeks. I just had one on Monday. So I still struggle with my hemoglobin and being tired. But what I go through now is nothing compared to the sepsis and that awful feeling, or tube exchange like I had before. This is way better. I mean, it's not fun and it's not great, and I'm exhausted all the time, but it's way better, and I don't care. I'm just so thankful to be here, because I honestly didn't know this was going to happen, and I had just a sliver of hope that I really thought Jeff and Jackson were going to bury me. I just, you know, my chances of me making it were pretty slim. So, you know, you just never give up hope. I mean, wow, that's really taught me a lot about that. And, you know, just when you think things are bad and horrible, they change. And there's always something good about something bad that happens. Sometimes you really, really have to look, but it's there. But I just am so thankful and, you know, here to tell the story, which some things that I have gone through are like nightmares and you really can't make up. And wow, I've had a lot of awful surgeries, but those 2 transplants were pretty okay. Yes, I ended up, so the cancer ended up taking my lymph nodes, went around my spleen, and they killed my spleen. They choked it off. So the day after Halloween, I woke up in excruciating pain, and I hadn't felt very good prior to that. I felt really awful. And I remember we had to wait for the bus to come to pick up Jackson because, yes, there's a picture of me where I have the NG too. I spent a month in the hospital. Yes, that's me after transplant, just hours after my second, yeah. But that was probably the most miserable surgery I had ever had. I sat for 3 days running like 106 fever, no pain meds, because those were hard to get because I needed fentanyl, and you had to move heaven and earth to try to get it. Well, then by the 3rd day, I finally had the surgery, and the transplant surgeon came up to me and he said, you know, your body tied that spleen off so perfectly, I really had not much work to do. And then he said to me, and these are his words, wow, Jeanette, we really can't make this shit up with you. And I said, yes, I know. So they were awesome to me during that stay, but it was a really awful stay. I didn't eat for a month because my gut had a hard time trying to recover since I don't have a colon. Kind of went to sleep, and I pretty much live with an ileus all the time because my gut's not in very good shape again. But at that time after that surgery, it really became a problem, and boy, it was awful. So a month later, I got out of the hospital, and I was in uncontrolled pain for the next 3 months. It was really awful. And yeah, that kind of really set me straight as to, you know, wow, that could have killed me really easy, and that kind of scared me, I think, a little bit. But yeah, it almost gave me OCD because you just don't want to run a high fever, and you think that if you go to the hospital, they're going to help you. But there I sat with uncontrolled pain, and yeah, that was terrible. So Mom stayed with me because it was harvest, of course. So Jeff was harvesting, and Kathy stayed. Yep, Kathy stayed with me. Bless her heart. And she's still my friend.
Maybe.
Yeah. Oh, but it was tough. It was hard on Jackson and Jeff, and it was not fun. Yeah, yeah, I got home the day before Thanksgiving. Yeah. So, yeah, it was good to be home, but a little bit scary because I didn't want to have to go back. But I didn't, thank goodness. But yeah, so, well, I'm going to open it up to questions. Go ahead, Mr. Michelson.
Well, Nettie, I've seen you over the years with all that you've gone through, and I'm always impressed that, I mean, it sounds like days before you had something happen to you, and yet you look like $1 million all the time.
I don't.
Yes,
Thank you for saying that.
I know, but I had other people tell me that too. It's like, how can she go through so much and still look like so good?
Yes,
Thank
exactly.
you. You know, a lot of it for me is, you know, I feel really cruddy, but I didn't care how cruddy I felt every day. If I felt like I looked good, maybe I would be good.
Makeup.
And so, yeah, makeup does wonders.
And your attitude.
And there's
Well,
always a smile,
thank
there's
you.
always a smile too.
Yes. Well, you know, at this point in my life, there's really nothing that they can tell me that I'm not like freaking out about. So we're just like, let's deal with it and do this.
So my question I really wanted to ask is, how normal is your life now?
He asked how normal is my life right now. It is really.
I mean, as far as eating and.
Okay, so yeah, I tell you what, it's a pill popping all day affair for me. 10 in the morning and 10 at night, and then my blood pressure is all over. And after you've had 20 years of plus years of immunosuppression, things just don't work quite as well, and so my kidneys are not doing so great. So I struggle with things with that, and foods. Since I don't have a colon, I have to be really careful in what I eat. So anything that's good for you is like out the window for me, like fruits and vegetables.
She likes nerds.
Candy and candy corn and no, just kidding. So if I do have them, then I really have to have them so they're mushy, like the vegetables and stuff. And then, just to keep my gut from it's hard to keep my gut functioning because I do have an ileus at all times, and so I just am used to that. And so every time I go in and have an x-ray, I have to tell them, don't send me to Omaha in the ambulance, because that has happened before. I have an ileus and it's okay. So, because I've had to go down because of that before, because some ER doctors panic, and I'm like, it's okay, it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they look at my x-rays, and my x-rays are not normal, and so they do, and I get used to that pain, but having an ileus or a blockage is very painful, and so, I don't know, you just kind of get used to that, living with that, and I know my body well, and I struggle with all kinds of little things that can be big deals. So I just try to stay on the straight and narrow. And I have a lot of different specialties. I mean, wow, infectious disease, my nephrologist, oncology, transplant. And when I go to have labs, I know which specialty I need, and so the poor things get really flustered when I come in because I have like 4 or 5 different ones at one time sometimes, so, yeah.
I've gone to appointments with Nettie, and she walks in, or the doctor will walk in, and they'll just look at her like, oh boy, she's a nutcase. And she looks normal. And then they get in her chart, and they scroll and scroll
Yes.
and scroll on all the medicine she's
Then
on.
they are always like, wait, the computer locked up, and I'm like, well, that's because it just pulled up my millions of charts. Gosh, I think I've been going to the med center for almost 30 years. If you guys can believe that. I've been transplanted longer in my life than I was with my own liver. So that's kind of crazy to think about. But yeah, go ahead.
Where did Jeff and Jackson end up staying when they couldn't find a place to stay?
Yeah, so Jeff and Jackson, I don't even remember where
Wasn't
they
it like-
stayed. It was kind of far away.
Yeah.
They went clear down
It's
on
like 40
West Center
Yeah, it
Road,
was
somewhere down along
30
there.
or 40 minutes away.
Yeah, it was. It was kind of a long ways away.
Yeah.
But yeah. So thankfully they found a place.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
And it's scary to think about Jeff driving in the city.
That's driving anywhere.
Yeah, that's right. Lou, good to
So
see you.
once a liver has been transplanted, can that liver again be transplanted?
Not that I know of, but maybe it could. I don't know. I suppose if it's still functioning correctly, it might be able to. Depends on the situation, I think, because every situation is different. They test them and make sure that they're going to be okay, and if they don't pass the test, then they don't transplant it. So I often
Why are they doing hepatitis?
well,
Just
because
that
there's such a shortage of organs, and there's so many people waiting that they just have to open it up to those people or to those, types of things. So sometimes they'll transplant somebody with a liver that's like that, and then just to give them more time. And then if they start having problems, then they'll have to go again. So, yeah, but I hope to never have to have another liver. Maybe a kidney, but
But you always have to have the liver and the bile ducts.
Yes.
Not everybody does.
Yeah, so with my disease, I had to have the full liver, so a partial liver was not able to work for me, yeah.
You're special.
I'm special. Oh my gosh, when they tell me that, it's like, I know. I had an ER doctor tell me one time that I was a special snowflake. I thought that was so funny. I had never been told that before. I guess I am a special snowflake. Special, all right. Judy.
How many hours when you get the call that
So we got,
have to be transplanted?
yep, so we got the call at 12:30 at night. And then they told me that we had to be there within a couple hours. So we said, you know, they gave us an hour to be at home and to kind of collect our whatever we needed, thoughts basically. And then we were able to go. And then after that, we waited for a long time. Yeah, because I think that they need to make sure that the organs are all going to go where they need to go. And then they do it at one time. And then they go out wherever they allocate them to.
Tell them that when they go to harvest an organ, there's like a pecking order that all has to come.
Yeah, so there's certain organs can only be out of the body for so long, like the heart and lungs are the most dire. So those are,
Heart, lung, and liver.
the heart, lung, and liver are usually the first three that get taken and go somewhere because they're the most dire that need to be transplanted as soon as they can. So the kidneys, you know, and other things then are secondary, yeah. So, yeah, I know, it's, you know, even when they told me that I was going to need a transplant, I was 14, and I was just like, okay. And it's funny because I went to the dentist, and the dentist told me, Jeanette, you're going to have your wisdom teeth out. And I was like, oh my gosh! Yeah. Well, I still have my wisdom teeth. So, if that tells you anything about the dentist.
I have a question.
Go ahead,
You
Jean.
said that you couldn't take fentanyl. I mean, you could, but they
Yeah.
outlawed it. But my
Yeah.
daughter just had a baby, and they gave her fentanyl.
So yes, so okay, so you can get fentanyl, but like on the liver floor. So when people come into the liver floor, it was a big deal because they would get drug addicts, and they would get people who were fentanyl users, and so that's why they wouldn't give it on that floor. So if it did come down, I learned this after numerous times and having to roll doctors' heads, that it can come down in a pump. And so that would be how it would work for me then, is that the doctor had to order it, but they had to be careful because they could get into trouble for ordering it also, especially on that floor. So whenever I went down there, I always wanted to go into the oncology floor because it was no problem there. But it was only on the transplant floor that I had that problem.
Well, she told me she would never take fentanyl again.
Yeah, you know, when any other place, yeah. See,
She
I,
didn't like that.
oh,
But,
yeah, yeah.
Obviously, you wouldn't need it. But
Yeah,
it's not
well,
a drug, evidently.
Had my share of hallucinations on it. I think one,
Pain meds regularly, though,
no,
right?
I don't. I don't take any pain meds. In fact, when I was dismissed from the hospital after my second transplant, I never took another pain pill again because I didn't want my gut to slow down or have problems. So I gutted the pain, and that's what I would do when I was septic too. Sometimes when I would go down and I was septic, I wouldn't need pain meds. So I just kind of gutted the pain because it wasn't that bad, if you can believe that. So, and I told him I wasn't a drug seeker, you know, when you run 106 fever, it doesn't really feel that great. I mean, it was,
Can't imagine.
yeah, it was hard. That was probably the most awful time in my life. Oh my gosh, yeah, I had been put out so many times through those ERCPs that when they would go to float you for certain even procedures that are simple, I wouldn't go to sleep. So, because I had had too much.
If they gave him that much, he'd be dead.
Yeah, they did. They told Jeff that if they gave him as much as they gave me, it would kill a horse, they actually told me to. So, because you just...
You're not a snowflake.
I know, I am not, I know. So, and even during my transplant, before I went in, I'm like, I'm so sorry, I've had so much, it's gonna take a lot, and it always did. So for each of my tube exchanges, I had anesthesia come and put me out, so.
One time when you were down there with your, was it your spleen? When you were in David at dinner at Shed. she was
Oh
just
yeah, I was.
I'm like, oh.
After my spleen surgery, I thought I was in Dave and Ellen Finneran's shed, machine shed. I don't know why. But I kept telling Jeff and Jackson that that's where I was at, and they were like, no, you're not. Found out soon enough that I wasn't. That's okay. Thanks for coming, Jean. Yeah, thank you.
Did you have both these done at the university?
I did, yep.
Okay.
I had both my transplants done at the university.
Okay.
It's funny because there was a lot of changes between the first one and the second one. So my first transplant, I had like 20-some units of blood during it. My second transplant, I had 3. It was unbelievable. And then the first one, they told me do not move after I had it, my transplant. And the second one, they're like, you want to get up? And I'm like, yeah.
Nettie, maybe tell them about like vacations for you when you're.
Yeah, that's right. So when I was going through all of this, I couldn't be any further than 2 hours away from the med center, just in case I would happen to get septic. I had to get down there fast. And a lot of times I would have to go to Ida Grove to the ER, and they'd stabilize me with antibiotics so I could make it to the Omaha. And my doctors would always tell them what to give me. So I never traveled for, it was a long time. I don't know, 7 years, I think. I never went anywhere. So after my second transplant, I went to Dubuque with Jeff and Jackson for the first time in years, and that was the furthest I had gotten away from home in ages. So, yeah, that was crazy. I also ended up having a really good relationship with my oncology doctors and my team, and so my oncology team ended up retiring on me at the same time. The oncology, infectious disease, and oncologist, and they were the ringleaders. I mean, especially one of them. She moved heaven and earth for me, and so we still keep in contact with them, and they've both been to my house. In fact, one of my oncologists flew his airplane up, and I picked him up in Denison, and he's been to my house. He flew Jackson and I around our farm. So that's been kind of fun, and they took me out for lunch a few times when I was in Omaha, so that's fun. I really enjoy them, and they, even though they're retired, they still watch over me, so that's kind of nice, yeah. So, yeah, but they were some pretty awesome people, so, yeah. Does anybody else have any questions? Sherry?
What was the difference, I mean, being that you've had 2, what do you think personally is the biggest difference between the first transplant and the second transplant, even medically? Like, do you feel like they did a better job? I mean, the first time you couldn't get up, the second time they said, yes,
Yeah,
you
so
can
the
get
first time they wouldn't let me get up because when they hooked the donor bile duct up to my bile ducts, they didn't want to me jostling around just in case those sutures would come apart. And if they came apart, then that meant they'd have to open me back up again and re-sew them on. They didn't want to do that, so they just made me hold still during that time. For my second one, they had learned so much in between that time that they learned that if you got up right away after surgery, it was the best. So get moving. Even after my spleen, they told me, get moving. And boy, I felt like that walrus that's in the pictures trying to get out of bed because it was that awful. It hurt so bad to get out of bed. So I always take a picture by that walrus picture when I am admitted into the floor. It's kind of become the ongoing joke. Sometimes I want to punch that picture. Anybody else have questions? I just hope that you learned something, and maybe I just could encourage you to be an organ donor, because it does work and it does save lives. And if people said no, I would not be here today. And even those that donate blood, the same thing. I wouldn't be here if people didn't donate blood, and I just appreciate that so much. I mean, my life has depended on it. So thank you guys. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to say what an inspiration.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I don't feel like one, but thank you. Well, thank you so much. And I just thank you guys all for coming, and I appreciate it so much. It's so good to see some of your faces. It's been a long time. I don't get out much. So it's good to see everyone. Thank you so much for listening to me. Oh, yes, there's bars and coffee, so please help yourselves.
Finish?
Yeah, just make sure.